They moved. Okay,
Okay.
here we are. So I'll look for Nancy when she comes in. For the last few weeks, we've been studying Samuel. Samuel was a special guy from the very beginning.
Hmm.
Even his birth was miraculous. God called Samuel as a child to be his prophet and leader of Israel. And as I was thinking about that just this afternoon, I thought, this is a really good example of the calling of God. We are all chosen by God before we're ever born. God chose Samuel. God chose Samuel before he was ever born, and he had a job for Samuel to do, and he did it. I just think that that's cool. And so, yeah, just a reminder that God chose Samuel from the very beginning before he was ever born, and then he used him, and he served for a long time. Last week we saw how God used Samuel to lead Israel into a period of revival, and this period of revival lasted for many years as Samuel was a judge. I believe that Samuel was a judge for 40 years. Today we will pick up the story of Samuel with Samuel being an old man, and we'll see some of Samuel's failings and also talk about Israel's failings. Okay, we're in First Samuel chapter 8. Gary, could you read verses 1 through 3, please?
When Samuel became old, he made his sons judges over Israel. The name of his firstborn son was Joel, and the name of his second, Abijah. They were judges in Beersheba. Yet his sons did not walk in his ways, but turned aside after gain. They took bribes and perverted justice.
Okay. So when Samuel became old, he appointed his sons as judges over Israel. Was that the right thing for him to do?
Sounds like it wasn't.
It wasn't. Whose responsibility was it to appoint a judge or leader of Israel?
Be the Lord.
That would be God. Each of the judges during the period of Judges was handpicked by God himself. In Deuteronomy chapter 18, verses 15 to 19, which we're not going to read, God told Moses that he would raise up a prophet like Moses to lead the people. This was an obvious reference to Jesus, but it also applied to the other leaders of Israel. During the time of the judges, God raised up men and women who led Israel. It's clear from the text that Samuel did not consult the Lord in his decision to make his sons judges. That was kind of a human thing to do. That was kind of the way their culture was. Whoever was the leader, okay, it's his sons that take his place, follow in his footsteps. But so Samuel just made his sons judges, even though he didn't ask God whether he should. Well, Samuel was God's man, but he was a man just like all, and he was a human being just like all of us, men and women. He had all the human failings to deal with. He wasn't perfect. None of us are. And he made some mistakes. I believe that Samuel also failed in raising his sons because they didn't have the same love of God and obedience to God that Samuel had.
I look at that and say, but what example did he have? Yeah, in there? Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly what's in my notes. Who does he have to learn from? Eli. Who was a bad parent? Eli. In fact, Samuel's sons did similar things that Eli's sons did.
He did.
Interesting. And Samuel, it looks like Samuel failed to correct his sons when he learned that they were sinning, just like Eli failed to correct his sons. And finally, Samuel didn't consult with God to determine who should take over leadership in his place. You know, Moses set the example. So Moses set the perfect example. God told Moses, "You're done. You're not going in the promised land." And Moses went back to God and pleaded with God. And he says, "But God, you know these people. You know how obstinate they are. You know the problems that they've created. They need a good, strong leader. Who do you think should be the leader in my place?" And God came immediately back and said, "Joshua, make Joshua the leader." God picked Joshua to be the leader. And but you know, when Joshua then served it, he led them into the promised land, and he led them in the conquest of the promised land. And in the end, did Joshua go to God and say, "God, who's going to be the next leader?" Did he ask God about any of that? No.
Not that we're told.
Not that we're told, that's right. And neither did Samuel. And I think there's some important lessons we can learn from this passage. First of all, child rearing is a very critical responsibility. We are always only one generation from a group of people from believing families turning away from God. One generation. Godly people can fail at child rearing. We just saw it. Samuel failed at it and end up with children who reject God. Even as grandparents, we have a responsibility to teach our grandchildren about God when we have a chance. You know, some of us don't have a great many opportunities to be with the grandchildren as much. We have two of them living with us in our house. It's our responsibility, as you know, when we interact with them, to show them God and teach them about God when we can.
As you rise up and as you sit down, as they said.
That's right.
Go forward.
And human beings, men and women, critically need strong leaders. We need strong government leaders. We need strong church leaders. Church leaders should be selected by God, however, not by men. Here's a problem. I was on a search committee. Martha was on a bunch of search committees at the church when I was at CBC. And it's really hard to get our biases out of that selection process. We come into those things with biases that we can't shake. And so it's really important that when we're trying to find out who should be our next church leaders, that we wait on the Lord and ask Him to show us and to stop us from putting our biases into the project. Only God knows the hearts of men and women, and prayers are key. And finally, as leaders, we must be preparing others to take up the reins when our time of leadership is over. It's important for us to do that. While it's true that God selects people to lead, we, through the Holy Spirit, it's our responsibility to train them and prepare them to lead. You know what Joshua was doing before God chose him as a leader? He was Moses' right-hand man for 40 years. The whole time they were in the desert, Joshua was Moses' assistant. When Moses went up on the mountain, Joshua went with him. He may not have gone all the way up where Moses was, but he was up there.
Wasn't he one of the ones that held up his arm during the battle?
No, Moses, he was doing the fighting.
Oh.
Yeah. So, yeah. Let me check on my email. I want to see if my email to Nancy failed because she hasn't come on. Doesn't look like it. Doesn't look like it. Okay. All right. Let's go on in our study. Barbara, could you read verses 25?
Then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah and said to him, Behold, you are old and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now appoint for us a king to judge us like all the nations.
Mm-hmm.
So the elders of Israel recognized they needed a strong leader, and Samuel's sons were not couldn't fill that position. So they demanded a king like all the nations around them. They want to be like everybody else. And what's not said here was at the time Israel was being threatened by the Ammonites and the Philistines. They wanted, it says, they wanted a king to lead them into battle. That's what they wanted. And so was their request for a king a surprise to God? I want us to read this passage in Deuteronomy 17, verses 14 to 20. Kathy, could you read that for us? It's kind of a long one, but it's important.
Deuteronomy. Okay. When you come to the land that the Lord your God is giving you, and you possess it and dwell in it, and then say, I will set a king over me, like all the nations that are around me, you may indeed set a king over you, whom the Lord your God will choose. One from among your brothers you shall set as king over you. You may not put a foreigner over you, which is not your brother, who is not your brother. Only he must not acquire many horses for himself, or cause the people to return to Egypt in order to acquire many horses, since the Lord has said to you, you shall never return that way again. And he shall not acquire many wives for himself, lest his heart turn away, nor shall he acquire for himself excessive silver and gold. And when he sits on the throne of his kingdom, he shall write for himself in a book a copy of this law approved by the Levitical priests. And it shall be with him, and he shall read it all the days of his life, that he may learn to fear the Lord his God by keeping all the words of this law and these statutes and doing them, that his heart may not be lifted up above his brothers, and that he may not turn aside from the commandment, either to the right hand or to the left, so that he may continue long in his kingdom, he and his children in Israel.
You know, when I found this passage, I was astounded by it. It surprised me. It surprised me. God laid it out, didn't he? He laid it out. He knew they were going to ask for a king. He knew it. So he says, you may indeed set a king over you, whom the Lord your God will choose. Clearly from this passage, God knew it was going to happen. Well, in fact, the king was in God's perfect plan. Jesus Christ had to be born of the kingly line so that he could be declared king on the earth. It had to be a son of David. He had a timeline and he had activities along this timeline. And part of that process for us to be saved by Jesus Christ was that they needed a king. So he knew it was going to happen. And he said, here are the rules. So what were the rules for kings? Number one, the king was to be selected by God. That's the most important one. Then the king must be an Israelite. You can't get a foreigner as a king. He must not acquire a large number of horses. He must not take many wives Too many wives could turn a king away from following God. That's what God said. I didn't say it. The king must not accumulate large amounts of gold and silver. He was to write a copy of the law on a scroll, and it was to go everywhere he went, and he was to read it all the days of his life, and he was then to obey that law. And the king was not to consider himself better than his brothers. Those are the rules. So
And
God,
Solomon violated most of those.
pardon?
And Solomon violated most of those.
All of them.
Yeah, most of them, certainly. He broke most of them. You know, that's in my notes, Barbara. You've been reading my notes. It's so obvious. It's just so obvious. When you read this and then you read about then you read the story about Solomon and you go, oh, wait a minute. Well, he was an Israelite, and he was selected by God. Those two were right. But he had a large number of forces. When you read First Kings and in I think Second Chronicles, you'll see that, yeah, Solomon had a lot of horses.
And wives.
He had 800 wives and concubines or something like that. They said he had so much wealth and gold that silver was like nothing. And did he write a scroll, the law on the scroll, and read it? I don't think so. He didn't obey the law at the end, and he did consider himself better than his brothers, and he was not supposed to. But those are the rules. Wow. Let me read verse 6 here in 1 Samuel. But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, "Give us a king to judge us," and Samuel prayed to the Lord. Samuel was not happy. It's clear from what God told Samuel that Samuel felt they were rejecting him.
I can see why.
Samuel, however, did the right thing. He went immediately to God in prayer. Samuel wasn't perfect, but he's probably more godly than I am. And what did he do? He went right to God. When something happens that upsets us, our first reaction should be to go to God and talk about it. There's nothing else that if there's nothing else that we can learn from Samuel, we should learn this. When something's bad, go to God. Go to God.
What else can you do?
Samuel had such a close relationship with God that he knew that's where his strength was. He knew that's where all the answers were. And what did he do? He went right to God. So, Gary, could you read verses 7 to 9?
Yes. And the Lord said to Samuel, obey the voice of the people in all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me from being king over them. According to all the deeds that they have done from the day I brought them up out of Egypt, even to this day, forsaking me and serving other gods, so they are also doing to you. Now then, obey their voice. Only you shall solemnly warn them and show them the ways of the king who shall reign over them.
So the people of Israel had been rejecting God from the very beginning. We saw as soon as they crossed the Red Sea, what was the first thing that happened? They grumbled. They couldn't get water, and something they grumbled. And they grumbled, and they grumbled, and they disobeyed God, and they made a golden calf. When God was talking to Moses, they made a golden calf and worshiped that. I mean, yeah, God was exactly right. Obviously, he's always right. So they'd been rejecting God all along, but God also told Samuel to listen to the elders and to warn them about what a king would do to them. But again, let's remember the fact that that there was going to be a king, and God said it was okay that they could ask for a king. Now he's going to warn them what a king's going to do, and yet it was in his sovereign plan to have a king. So let's read about Samuel's warning concerning kings. Barbara, could you read verses 10 to 18, please? It's kind of a long, but
Hold on.
okay.
Okay. So Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking for a king with him. He said, "These will be the ways of the king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them to his chariots, and to be his horsemen, and to run before his chariots. And he will appoint for himself commanders of thousands and commanders of fifties, and some to plow his ground, and to reap his harvest, and to make his implements of war, and the equipment of his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers, and cooks, and bakers. He will take the best of your fields, and vineyards, and olive orchards, and give them to his servants. He will take the tenth of your grain and of your vineyards, and will give it to his officers and to his servants. He will take your male servants and female servants, and the best of your young men and your donkeys, and put them to his work. He will take the tenth of your flocks, and you shall be his slaves. And in that day you will cry out because of your king, whom you have chosen for yourselves, but the Lord will not answer you in that day."
Pretty strong words. So here's the things that God told Samuel to tell the people that the king would do. He would take their sons to be in their army. Yeah, there's draft. They bring up the draft. He would take their sons to farm his own land. He would take their sons to be his armorers, make his armor and stuff, chariots and so forth, weapons. He would take their daughters to be perfumers, cooks, and bakers. He would take the best of their land and give it to his own attendants. And he would tax them. In other words, he would take a tenth of everything they had. They hadn't had taxes before, never had taxes, ever.
With temple taxes, but
The only thing that the law said they were to give a tenth of everything to God. But this is on top of that. This is on top of it. And then Samuel warned them that when they complained about their king doing these things, that God would not listen to them. But what was their reaction? Kathy, could you read verses 19 to 22?
Okay. I mean, 19 to 22. But the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel, and they said, "No, but there shall be a king over us, that we also may be like all the nations, and that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles." And when Samuel had heard all the words of the people, he repeated them in the ears of the Lord. And the Lord said to Samuel, Obey their voice and make them a king." Samuel then said to the men of Israel, "Go every man to his city."
go home.
Interesting. What they said, "No, but there shall be a king over us, that we also may be like all the nations, that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles." They wanted a king that would fight their battles, lead them in battle. Who was their king before this? Who was their king?
God.
That's right. It was God. This amazes me. Last week we studied how when Samuel was a judge, the people had repented of their sin and they came and they wanted to turn back to God, and they got rid of their idols and they came together at Mizpah to worship. And when they came together, the Philistines heard about it and set up to attack them. And what they do? They prayed. They asked Samuel to pray for them. He gave them did a sacrifice of a lamb. And what did God do? He thundered against the Philistines and destroyed them. He killed them. Israel didn't do much at all but cleanup work. God did all the work. He thundered against the Philistines and threw them in such a panic that they were defeated. How quickly we forget. These people are saying, oh, but we need a king to fight our battles. The Ammonites and the Philistines are back and they're threatening us again. Why didn't they just go back to God and say, God, help us? They're just like us. That's what we do too. We forget. We forget. Our forgetters work better than our rememberers. We need to remember. You know, it's important for us to count our blessings. Count your blessings, name them one by one. And it will surprise you what the Lord has done. That's what that song says. And it does. When you start looking back and start counting what God's done, it does. It's to me, every time I do it, it surprises me.
Because there's so much.
There's so much. God's doing something for me all the time. How quickly we forget. We need to learn that lesson. We need to learn that lesson. Our forgetters get us in trouble. We need to remember what God has done for us. But what happened? God consented and told Samuel to give them a king. But
And how'd that work out for you?
and God is the one that will choose Saul to be the first king. God chooses him, but it didn't work out too good. But let us never forget that a king in Israel was important to God's plan for our salvation. We need to get to David. We need to get to David to be the king. David, in the Old Testament, David's a pivotal character. There are several pivotal characters in the Old Testament. Abraham, well, Noah is the first one. Abraham's the second one. Isaac, not as much. Jacob is another one. Joseph is another one. And now we're here. Samuel is another one. And Joshua, Moses, obviously, and Joshua. But then the next one after Samuel is David. And when you start studying the Kings and First and Second Kings and First and Second Chronicles, all the kings that follow are evaluated against David. David is held up as the example for what a king is supposed to be like. And that's important, but it's all part of God's plan. Hi, Nancy.
Finally! I've been trying the whole time and it finally popped up.
Good.